largely untouched and teeming with rich biodiversity. Yet something has changed over the last 50 years. Coral reefs, top ocean predators, and some of our last pristine marine ecosystems are vanishing. How much more damage must occur before we take action? Healthy marine ecosystems protect our coastlines from storms and erosion, providing safe habitats for millions of species key to nature's equilibrium, offering food security to billions of people and shielding against climate change. The Ocean Decade fosters an understanding of the challenges facing our ocean so we can live in harmony with nature. Networks of marine protected areas combined with nature-based solutions can sustain our needs and livelihoods while rebuilding a mindful, sustainable and equitable relationship with our shared ocean. Acting as one global community, we can harness knowledge to build tools that protect, restore and manage marine and coastal ecosystems. In the ocean we want, marine ecosystems are cherished and understood, keeping our ocean healthy and resilient. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 3. Sustainably feed the global population. How do we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? The ocean has nourished us for thousands of years, fueling and strengthening our communities while underpinning human health and development. Yet growing populations, along with greater awareness of the harmful impacts of land-based meat sources, have driven the demand for ocean-based alternatives. This has led to bigger and unsustainable fishing, trawling and dredging the ocean floor, disturbances in the ocean food web, and disappearing fish species. Is there time to restore ocean seafood resources? Yes. The Ocean Decade allows scientists, governments, and industry to explore and implement innovative solutions that reduce pressure on marine ecosystems by restoring and managing fish stocks, improving aquaculture, and harvesting sustainable seafood. Consuming sustainable seafood is an easy way to join the Ocean Decade. Together, we can support communities relying on seafood resources for their livelihoods while multiplying the seafood the ocean supplies. In the ocean we want, we protect crucial ocean habitats and harvest seafood mindfully so we can always rely on the ocean to feed the global population. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 4. Develop a sustainable and equitable ocean economy. How do we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? The ocean provides livelihoods and nourishment for hundreds of millions of the world's poorest people. The global economy depends on the ocean through fisheries, energy, tourism, and transport. The way we manage and share the ocean's limited resources has a global impact on coastal communities, indigenous peoples, and marine ecosystems. Let's seize the Ocean Decade to unlock transformative ocean science solutions that connect people with the ocean in a productive cycle. Investing in ocean science and technological innovations will create employment opportunities around the world and multiply sixfold the amount of seafood available. A clean, healthy ocean also impacts tomorrow's renewable energy sources, minerals, and medical breakthroughs. Over the next 10 years, Blue Knowledge will give us the tools to use and manage our marine resources for a healthy and productive ocean, for the well-being of humankind and the planet. In the ocean we want, both society and planet benefit from an equitable and sustainable ocean economy, so no one is left behind. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 5. Unlock ocean-based solutions to climate change. How do we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? The ocean is our greatest ally against climate change. It absorbs heat and carbon in the atmosphere. Mangroves and coral reefs protect communities against climate change effects. Ocean-based energy reduces harmful greenhouse gas emissions. But our ocean is unhealthy, with rising temperatures and sea levels, acidic waters, shrinking glaciers, disappearing ecosystems and species, intense weather events, and fish populations shifting toward cooler waters. This leaves our planet and humanity at great risk. Time is ticking. Life and livelihoods in many small island states are already suffering. Ocean science helps us understand ocean climate interactions with data and knowledge to predict and respond to changes. Together, let's harness the Ocean Decade for ocean-based solutions to help mitigate, adapt, and build resilience to climate change, like making smarter investments in technologies that lower greenhouse gas emissions. From mountain to seashore, from small island communities to the largest cities. In the ocean we want, our ocean protects us and makes us resilient to climate change. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 6. Increase community resilience to ocean hazards. How do we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? Rising sea levels, harmful algae blooms, and more frequent destructive storms are putting the lives and livelihoods of coastal communities around the world in jeopardy. As threats increase, experts and authorities must have the knowledge to issue warnings, and communities must have the skills and information to respond effectively. The Ocean Decade will foster investment in more effective forecast and early warning systems so we can reduce risks and save lives on land and at sea. From global early warning systems to coastal cities and communities ready to face tsunamis, storm surges, and rising sea levels, to coastal and marine ecosystems that are protected and can offer nature-based solutions to protect communities and infrastructure. Let's harness ocean knowledge to empower individuals and prepare communities so they are ready to face natural ocean hazards. In the ocean we want, people and communities are safe and resilient because we can reduce and respond to the hazards of a dynamic ocean. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 7. Expand the global ocean observing system. How do we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? We're all connected through one shared ocean, from the coast to the high seas, from the ocean's surface to its depths. Sharing information and technology keeps us safe, our economies productive, and our ocean healthy. Through ocean observing systems, scientists, experts, and governments share observations for climate, operational services, and marine ecosystem health. But the current system has gaps and lacks institutional and financial support. Let's seize the Ocean Decade as a chance to amplify this system's impact, making it sustainable and capable of delivering critical information to those who need it. Together we can expand the knowledge of our past, current, and future ocean, leaving no country behind. A truly inclusive and integrated observing system can predict climate, forecast weather, monitor and manage ocean health, and offer real-time services for sustainable development. In the ocean we want, our global ocean observing system tells us about the state of our ocean, so we can respond to changing conditions wherever we are. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
Ocean Decade Challenge number 8. Create a digital representation of the ocean. How do we move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want? First, we must fully explore today's ocean. Its countless challenges and endless possibilities. Sometimes this means understanding the past, and sometimes this means projecting the future. Today, we know more about the moon than we do the ocean. But we have a unique opportunity to change this. Working with some of the best minds in ocean science, the Ocean Decade fosters partnerships to explore and fully map the ocean, creating a digital atlas of our planet's crown jewel, from surface to depths, from biodiversity to cultural and social values, from shorelines to open spaces. This knowledge will support dynamic and sustainable ocean management in a constantly changing ocean. Let's find new ways to see our past, current, and future ocean through open data and freely shared information. Together, let's create an accessible ocean for present and future generations. In the ocean we want, we know everything about the ocean so that we may better protect and sustainably manage our planet's blue wealth. Are you up to meeting this Ocean Decade Challenge? Join us today.
evening, good morning, good day, wherever in the world you're following us from. A very warm welcome to the wrap-up of our 5th Ocean Decade Laboratory, A Safe Ocean, hosted by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research in partnership with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. My name is Monica Jones. I'm very happy to be back to co-guide you through the next 90 minutes because we have a co-moderator. I'm going to introduce her to you very, very shortly. But first, let me bring you up to speed in case you're joining us just now and don't quite know what the Ocean Decade is all about. The United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2021 to 2030 as the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. In short, the Ocean Decade, to bring together scientists and stakeholders to help restore our planet's largest ecosystem, and that, of course, is the ocean, prepare a path for a sustainable development. And the first International Ocean Decade Conference was kicked off at a high-level event last year, 2021. It's since been followed by 7 Ocean Decade laboratories, each focusing on one very specific Ocean Decade outcome. So this is the 5th laboratory focusing on a safe ocean. But before we review the last 48 hours, which was very, very action-packed with a core event and plenty of satellite activities, let me just familiarize you with our conference platform so you don't miss anything. I think the most important thing is that you need to be in the live stream in order to follow the event, and I assume you are in the live stream, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see and hear me, and you can choose the language that you understand best, English, French, or Spanish, or English with subtitles. Now, we also have this white box on the right-hand side of the live stream, the chat box. Now, we will not do Q&As, question and answers in this wrap-up, but you can leave messages, of course, say hello, how are you, or whatever comment you want to leave there. Now, below the live stream, we have the agenda where you can get a good overview of the program, about all the sessions and all the speakers as well, speakers' biographies, all of that is available there. And during this event now, you can also reach out to our live help desk, where you can get in touch with a very helpful team in case you run into problems. Hopefully that won't be the case. In the left-hand column in dark green, there are several buttons, including the lounge button. Here you can review all the laboratories that already took place, so 4 right now. Further down below, you find the satellite activities button. We had 20, and we will review some of them in this wrap-up, of course. Then we have the Ocean Library, where you can download and share photos, documents, videos, as long as you credit the author. That would be nice. You can also find the FAQ section there, so the frequently asked questions, and plenty more. And then we do have the Ocean Decade booth, and this one this time is giving you more in-depth information about one specific satellite activity, an animated documentary, The Girl and the Tsunami, and this satellite activity we're going to review actually also as part of this wrap-up session. So this is all you need to know at the moment. Of course, if you use Twitter, we would very much appreciate if you used the hashtag Ocean Decade when sharing content online. And I think we're good to go and start this Ocean Decade Laboratory wrap-up. But not alone. Let's first bring our 2 co-chairs back in. That's Christoph von Hillebrand Andrade, Deputy Director, International Tsunami Information Center, Caribbean Office in Puerto Rico, and Burkhard Baschek. He's an oceanographer and Scientific Director of the German Ocean Museum in Stralsund. Good to see you both again. Good morning to you, Christa, and a very good evening to you, Burkhard. We had 2 or almost 3 very, very busy days. Tell me about how you spent those days, if you were reflecting on what we heard during the core events, and certainly the impressive reach. I think we have some very interesting statistics as well.
So yeah, Monica, my mind is in overdrive and my body is all exhausted with all the inspiring and really thought-provoking information. So after the core event, I spent almost 48 hours traveling around the world. And it was enriched and inspired and challenged by the discussions of so many different aspects of a safe ocean.
Well, Burkhard, yeah?
Hey,
Tell
Monica.
us.
Yeah, it was certainly a wonderful adventure around the world with many great contributions through the satellite activities. And as you mentioned before, we had a wonderful reach during the opening event, reaching 116 countries with a wonderful coverage around all the globe with the different continents. And we very gladly accepted here in Germany or Europe to have this event at very odd hours with the aim of reaching in particular the big ocean states in the Pacific region and also the Caribbean. And that proved to be successful, and that's something we're very, very happy about.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, in fact, it's really fascinating. And so, in fact, in the permanent secretary of the British Virgin Islands, the Honourable Charlene Desbrio, in her opening statements for our Caribbean first co-design event said, "The oceans are crying and our people are dying," referring really to the terrible affectations our region has had from ocean-related hazards. And this is no different from our brothers and sisters in the South Pacific Islands. So I believe that the importance of a safe ocean are reflected in these numbers. When you think about it, the Caribbean and the Pacific islands make up for 0.5% of the world population. And for this safe ocean in the core event, they represented 10% and 7% respectively of the audience. So, we're just really hopeful that this event will further contribute in making us safer and more resilient from ocean hazards.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it was actually worth it also to, from a European perspective, to set this Ocean Decade Laboratory at such a late hour. Burkhard and I, we are late night owls, have been over the last few days, but the numbers say that was the right decision. And Burkhard, I think you and I, we still look rather fresh, and we certainly can continue with the wrap up. So Krista and Burkhard, thank you for the moment. Obviously, I will need you again very, very shortly. But let me first remind everybody again that this Decade Laboratory has had and still has a clear focus on the Pacific region as well, the Caribbean, of course, but also the Pacific region. And this is actually where the co-moderator I'm going to introduce to you very shortly, I keep the suspense here, is based. But let's get an idea which region we're talking about. So pack your bags and let's join an ocean voyage to the southern Pacific Islands. that was a nice journey, and we've reached our destination, the Southern Pacific Islands, and this is where my co-moderator is standing by, and I'm going to reveal who she is. Her name is Mary Naila Tikau. She's a storyteller, hello, a development professional with more than 15 years of experience in strategic communication, research, and public diplomacy. Diplomacy, very important when communicating. Mary, so very good to have you on board, to have you by my side, to take some of the burden of this wrap-up, and of course also sharing your expertise. And I have to say good morning to you, actually, because that's the kind of time zone that you're in.
Greetings, Monica. Bula, Talofa, Hafaday from the Oceanic region of the Pacific. As you said, Monica, it is the morning. It's wonderful to be with you today, Friday morning, where I am in Suva, Fiji. And to everyone joining us, whatever time it is where you are, I hope the day's been kind to you.
Thank you so much. The day over here in Berlin is very soon coming to an end, but it was a kind day, and let's hope for more days like that. Mary, you consult and create for a variety of organizations. You're currently co-hosting, or you're actually hosting, not co-hosting, you're co-hosting here, but there you are hosting season 2 of VOSA, which is a Pacific storytelling podcast featuring conversations with creators, with thinkers, change makers across the region. How did you experience the last 48 hours? Did you have time?
Well, I tell you, Monica, I identified with so many of the stories from the last 48 hours. And as a storyteller, and I'm sure we're all storytellers at heart, I'm sure we all took away something from it. I know I did. An oceanic region like ours in the Pacific, where we are 98% ocean, a safe ocean is certainly essential for us. But as I know has been said at a previous wrap-up, there is not one person on the planet whose life is not affected by the health and state of the ocean. So the more ocean champions we can encourage for a safer ocean all over the world, the better it is for our planet.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so wonderful with those Ocean Decade laboratories to bring everyone together in a regular way. So, Mary, of course, we're going to review the last 48 hours, and traditionally each laboratory starts with a core event, and I think we should stick to that tradition. That core event took place 2 days ago. So let's review some highlights. Again, we prepared a video. Let's watch that together. Hello and welcome to our 5th Ocean Decade Laboratory, A Safe Ocean.
The first things that come to mind when we think of the ocean are its beauty and its endless expanse. But the ocean also has another, unpredictable and destructive side.
This UN Ocean Decade Laboratory is the start to jointly develop a safe ocean.
20 meters away, there was strong current, and water was actually moving around in circles, which indicated to me that that there must be something happening. There was a lot of frightened people. There was a lot of panicking.
We haven't experienced this kind of catastrophe before, and it caught everybody by surprise. Everything went blank. All the communications went down. Of course, our undersea cable that connects us to the rest of the world was damaged by the eruption.
Submarine volcanoes are very, very difficult to monitor. Even for a geologist who studies volcanoes for my job and talking to our volcano community around the world, this is a very, very unusual event. Very, very explosive and unusually powerful.
We need to advance in two directions. One is technology to monitor and warn, but technology by itself is useless if people doesn't know what it means and doesn't know how to react.
We are transforming towards a digital society. We are also facing a growing uncertainty of tsunami risk in the future. And this changes the game of in the tsunami risk reduction realm.
what we in the Caribbean are facing was very much exemplified by 2021, where we saw hazards concurrent, compounding, and cascading impacts. So what we have here is the need for cooperation and cross-cutting activities at national and regional levels.
We have the elements and the knowledge to know that the future is more complex, more interconnected.
We have to take that science and discuss it with the local people, with the people that are at risk. And there is where you're going to develop those kind of empowerment.
Nowadays, you know that it is a strong credibility in social media, for example. So you have to use it cleverly, that the people will believe what I am sending as an information. This approach will help us to ascertain what we are doing and help the people to take action and save life and property.
Sustainability and governance, those need to be addressed in order to ensure that whatever investment is made will produce the outcomes that are desired.
Each person has their own rights, aspirations, and is a valuable part constituting the community. And I think that that's really the essence of leave no one behind.
So science is a close friend of yours. How do you combine this traditional knowledge that you definitely have and the scientific one?
I think they do complement the other. They weave among them. And having that voice in those decisions is also part of environmental justice and a safe ocean.
A song has been created for that cry of the grandmothers. And this is what I can remember of it. Oh, 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 oh. Mm-hmm. It's really sad to say that the grandmothers have been warning us that things aren't right.
The ocean does not recognize a border, nor does it understand whether you are, which party you are in, but it understands if you're going to take care of it.
We've all have been witnesses today to some fantastic information, some fantastic knowledge, and that can make a real difference.
So please be participants, speak to your governments. So together in these 3 days and even more in the decade, we will move to the ocean we need for the future we want.
So these were some, I think, quite impressive and also representative voices and moments of the core event. Very intense discussions going on there. Let's sort of jog our memory again and get the chairs of some of the sessions in here now. We have here with us Silvia Chacon-Barrantes. I'll just introduce you again for those who weren't at the core event. Silvia, she's a tenured professor at the physics department of the National University in Costa Rica, the coordinator and founder of the Tsunami program, and acting as the National Tsunami Warning Center for Costa Rica. Silvia, good to have you back. And of course, our co-chairs, Burkhard and Krista, who were also chairing some of the sessions during the core event. And Mary, you pay attention to what they're telling us now, because I'm sure there is one or two questions that should follow up. Now, Silvia, I would like to start with you, because the core event started also with some witnesses' accounts of the Hunga Tonga, Hunga Hapai submarine volcano eruption, which was, it just made it clear how that came literally out of the blue. People were not prepared for it. And your session followed suit, how to prepare for the unexpected. What stuck out most from that session for you? Was there something where that surprised you, or something that you definitely want everyone to remember?
I think what it came from that session is that we need to work, as I said before, in two fronts. We need to improve technology and warning systems and institutions, but that's nothing if we don't work with people. If we don't empower people and people doesn't know what the natural warnings are and what the other warnings are and what they have to do and what can they expect. So technology might fail, and it kind of failed for this Hunga Tonga Hunga Apai tsunami in January. But people can always be prepared if they know what to do and if they know how to recognize the natural signs, and that they need to react really fast. So we need to work in those two directions. And from that panel, we got the confirmation that this is what we need to do.
Did you get from that panel also concrete ideas in terms of solutions, i.e. concrete ways how to inform people, how to empower people? Because I think it's clear that that is absolutely necessary, but how to go about it?
Well, we got ideas on how to improve technology and monitoring and warning systems, but also we got some discussion on the importance on the message that is being transmitted to people, and that social media needs to be reliable, that we need to build our reputation, to call it somehow, when we from institutions in social media. So people will believe what we said and search us for official information. That's something that is very important here.
Absolutely, especially in the days of sadly fake news, credibility, reliability is key in this respect. Well, thank you, Sylvia. I just briskly move on to Krista, because certainly when it comes to communication and the use of social media and how to get the message across, that was also a very important point in your panel on integrated coastal hazards in global marine systems. Actually, you were in a very interesting setting at the Eco-Exploratorio Science Museum in Puerto Rico, and you had a live audience. Krista, if you would, just tell us a little bit about that experience.
That was wonderful. After 2 years of just virtual meetings, to be able to be together with the public, to be able to be with high school students, with elementary students, with parents, with grandmothers, with volunteers, with the director of the Puerto Rico Seismic Network, with communicators, and to be able to have that interaction, have them in the audience as we had this dialogue, was really it was fantastic. And I just hope that these opportunities for personal engagement, are going to continue. They continue to grow, but also that we stay connected through the virtual world. Because over these past 2 years, I've also met and reached out to people that it would have been impossible to have shared and heard their stories if I had just been limited to in-person events.
Well, certainly an event like this one would be impossible in person, and probably not good for the environment if we try to make it possible, everybody flying all over the place for this. But Krista, was there a main takeaway? It was a very interesting session you had there. Was there something that surprised you? Anything that stuck out?
Well, one of the things that really stuck out was that when we're in the Caribbean, where we're in the process and we're talking about our systems and we need to develop the systems or we need to implement a program, we're always talking about the funding. Where are we going to get the funding to do this? So it's always a huge concern, and it is important. But one of our panelists, she reminded us that just as important as the funding is the good governance and the sustainability of the systems. And she recalled, what we've experienced over the years. Systems come in and systems go out, and projects are, a lot of projects, but not programs are established, right? And so I think that was really important that we have, and as we look to develop and integrate our early warning systems and services in the Caribbean, that we really address those governance and sustainability issues straight out front.
Right. Money isn't everything. It's important, but if it's not used in the appropriate way, it doesn't do any good. Well, Krista, thank you for the moment. We have one more session that we should recap. And Burkhard, you didn't visibly chair that session, but I know you were instrumental in bringing this session together, the fourth one, environmental justice and right. We just in this video, we saw that scene with Shikolum, a native or indigenous American who did the cry of the grandmothers for us. So it was about somehow building a bridge between traditional knowledge and science, and why that is important for us to have a safe ocean. Burkhard, can you recap some of the most important things being said there for us?
Yeah, thank you, Monica, of course. The most touching moment was for me, like when Chief Ray Harris of the Coast Salish people in Chemainus on Vancouver Island said about this session, this evokes memories of the old times. In some ways bringing hope back that things will maybe return to the old times. And he then called witnesses, the panelists as witnesses, as well as you, Monica, and with the responsibility to forever remember the day. And when somebody asks you what has been said and what you've heard, you provide the facts to them. Now, I would like to list a couple of quotes here. It's best to let the people speak for themselves. And for him, first of all, he said that the Coast Salish are matriarchal people. And the grandmothers, they've been carrying the law for decades long. And basically, they were warning in his lifetime that things aren't right. We're feeling bad. What is coming? We're feeling pushed out of our villages. We're getting rules and regulations. They're building pulp mills on our beaches. And that's sort of the key message that also Deborah Lekonoff picked up on. She is representative in Washington State and a mother, which in that respect is also important. And she said, sustainable and safe ocean is every part of my role as Native American. It is my responsibility to make sure that my children and children's children are going to understand and deliver this great world that we have inherited from our ancestors. And that was also then emphasized again in some ways, like from Claudia Baron, who's like from the native indigenous community in Colombia. And she emphasized that indigenous communities are highly dependent on natural resources. And also that indigenous knowledge has proven to be successful for sustainability. In that respect, science and indigenous knowledge, they complement each other and they're not in competition. Andrea Sen, who's working for the World Food Program, also pointed out that sustainability, traditional knowledge, and indigenous rights are very closely connected, but that we also need technology. But it's not about providing a solution that's simple. It's also not about providing a solution that's very elaborate. It's about a solution that's fit for purpose. And that's what we need to work on to make sure that we do reach the people and leave nobody behind.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Burkhard, for recapping this for us in such a consummate way as well. Mary, I've been watching you as well. You've been nodding. You were listening. Is there any question left open that you would like to ask now?
Well, thanks, Monica. I couldn't agree more with Sylvia's expression of technology and people being so equally important, and Krista as well raising the issue of sustainability. And my question is related to Burkhard's aspect of traditional knowledge and its complementary role. I'd love to hear from you, Sylvia and Krista, about what might some of your reflections be on the value of traditional knowledge or community learning or historical learning in the work that you are doing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, traditional knowledge is something that has been generated over many, many generations. And in some ways, it's a long-term experience of how you have to live with the resources that you do have. You wouldn't have survived if it didn't work out. In that sense, it's a very valuable memory that is passed on from generation to generation. And that is something that we're certainly missing in our science approach, where we can only look a few years ahead with a fairly reasonable forecast. In that sense, like the message of how to live sustainably on, with, and at the oceans is something that we have to learn from traditional knowledge to weave it into our science approach. And I think in that sense, it's really a complementary way of seeing things and living with it.
Thank you, Burkhard. I see Sylvia nodding there. I was just wondering if you or Krista might have something to add.
Yeah, I think that it's very important to include our traditional knowledge in the very beginning of the conversation, in the co-design stage, right? So when we talk and we go into the community, the programs, that education and that outreach. These people, we need to have those discussions early on as we develop the products, as we develop our learning materials, as we have those conversations, then we can integrate it. So I think that is going to be key, because there's no one size fits all, education or outreach materials, right? And so we have to tailor to their needs and also bring in their ideas into it to have something that's going to be effective for all.
I agree with Krista, because we need communities to empower themselves. And if they build it from their own experience, then the preparedness is going to be more successful. So definitely we have to incorporate it from the beginning.
Well, thank you.
And I think I just want to add one thing I think it's important, is I think we also need to integrate them more into our workforce. So that's why I was very happy to see, Claudia, she's going through this academic process, right? And then she'll be integrated. I think that is also going to be key. And, we can't do multi-hazard. We can't give warnings without people. And so we really need to address now that present and future human capacity, and to integrate our youth, our early career, but also our indigenous, and look out and reach out to them with internships, with scholarships, recognize right from the beginning. Then we will have a much more balanced and effective workforce in the future.
That was a very good point, Krista, and I'm very glad you brought it up. And thank you also, Mary, for the question. We have so much more recapping to do, because apart from the core event, we also had all those satellite activities. So at this point, I would like to thank Burkhard, Krista, and Sylvia. Mary, I'll be seeing you shortly. Actually, I will see all of you fairly shortly again. But first, we take a teeny-weeny break. Not a real break. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, because that was the beautiful transition from the core event to the satellite activities, Mary. Did you have time to actually attend some, follow them? Oh, we don't hear you. Did you switch yourself off? I can't hear you. No sound.
I'm still unmuted.
Yes, you're back. All right, but you heard me about the satellite activities. Okay, shoot.
It's hard to pick a favorite, Monica. I couldn't dial into as many as I would like to have, but I did see a few that I was interested in.
Okay, but we're going to recap a few now, and let's start to set the sails towards the first satellite activity that we'll be reviewing.
That's right. Well, it's my great pleasure to be introducing the case. Sorry for that early start. It's my great pleasure to be introducing a taste of our satellite activities. There were 25 of them, and we are joined by representatives of a few of them today. So here we go, and pleased to welcome our first satellite activity representative. Greetings, Jerome. We have Jerome Okan with us, the head of the Pacific Community Center for Ocean Science, joining us from Noumea in New Caledonia. And Jerome, your satellite activity was to do with Wakamoana, a safe Pacific Ocean. Over to you to share headlines from your event.
Yes, good morning, Mary. Yes, yesterday we did gather a very good audience of up to 115 people. And those people joined us mostly from the Pacific, but we did have participants joining us all the way from Nigeria and from Puerto Rico. And as a reminder, for the title of our event, Waka Moana. Waka Moana is the Polynesian name for those ocean-going canoes that allow the Pacific people to travel from island to island and archipelagos to archipelagos. So yesterday, we heard from a number of the countries and territories in the Pacific on how we actually concretely move towards a safer ocean for the Pacific. What are the concrete activities and how is it done? And for example, we heard in Tuvalu about their latest coastal adaptation project. And they stressed how the alliance between modern science and community input is essential if you want to achieve sustainable coastal protection against the unavoidable storm surge and extreme sea level events that will continue to occur. We also heard from Vanuatu on how the countries can face not just one, but multiple and sometimes simultaneous ocean hazards, and the difficulty to actually protect the population against those multiple hazards. And we also heard about some of the key barriers to improve and to make the ocean safer. We also heard from Fiji, and in Fiji we heard concretely, our modern science, our computer programs can help us fight or protect the population against coastal flooding. And we had a more emotional report from Tonga about the events after the recent eruption and the difficulties to communicate. And to kind of wrap it up on really and this is one key point for the Pacific, we also heard from the Solomon Island, from the Maritime Authority, on how to make navigation safer, because you can imagine that for a region made of islands, ocean navigation is absolutely key. And finally, we had a very nice poem, very personal, that reminded us all that the ocean is not just blue and typical postcard-like, but it can really become quickly treacherous and dangerous. And that was the whole point of those suite of series of Safe Ocean Labs. And over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Jerome. You alluded a little there to some of the barriers, and I was wondering what is specific to the Pacific when it comes to ocean hazards, and what are the critical gaps that you are seeing today?
Well, yes, indeed. The Pacific is facing many challenges when it comes to ocean safety. Well, first, it's made of numerous small islands. So if you were to compare to, for example, a coastal country where you only have a fraction of the population that is concerned by ocean hazards, in the Pacific, essentially the entire population is concerned or is at risk of ocean hazards because they might not live right on the shoreline, but they might travel by the sea, they might work by the sea, they might have a number of activities by the sea. So it concerns many people on these islands, and those islands can also be isolated, meaning each island individually doesn't have the capacity to protect itself without regional or national cooperation or communication among the different islands. Another challenge is the multiple hazards that are faced by those islands. It could be distant swells generated by storms in the high latitudes. It can be storm surges from tropical cyclones. It can be tsunamis. And unfortunately, sometimes it's two at once. We've seen tsunami warning going on at the same time as we had a cyclone warning. So it shows all the difficulties of maintaining a safe ocean when we're faced with such a large number of possible hazards. And we also have sometimes lacks of competencies and infrastructures in those islands. And really to sum it up, as I said earlier, all these issues are important because ocean navigation is absolutely essential for transport, whether for cargo or for people, and also for fishing, as it's the main food source for the Pacific. So having a safe ocean so that people can safely navigate on it and live by it is absolutely key for the Pacific Islands.
Thanks, Jerome. The ocean is indeed a highway for the Pacific and for many regions. Forward-looking, and just very briefly, Jerome, what would you like to see 10 years from now?
Well, what I would like to see is those, what we call the 4 pillars of an effective early warning systems in place and operational. And those 4 pillars are disaster risk knowledge. You need to know what you're dealing with. You need to be able to detect and monitor those hazards. That's the second pillar. And then once you know what's happening, you need to be able to communicate and disseminate those information messages to the population. And the last pillar will be the preparedness and response, because you want to have governments and communities ready to act in the face of a disaster.
Thank you,
Thank
Jerome.
you, Mary.
Thank you. Now looking forward to traveling from the Pacific to Ghana. We have our next satellite activity speaker with us today, Bennett Apsu-Foley, an oceanographer with the University of Ghana at the Regional Marine Center. Bennett's satellite activity was around the issue of safety for fishers. Bennett, welcoming you to share headlines from your satellite activity.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, so as you already said, our satellite activity focused on providing information for fishermen who go to sea every day, especially the artisanal fishermen. So our activity basically was in the form of a mini workshop kind of, where we invited some speakers from various sectors of the fisheries, and as well as from the African Union Commission, to also give their word on their support to making the ocean or the sea a safe place for fishermen. So in all, we had 3 presentations. One came from GeoBlue Planet, and that presentation highlighted on the activities of GeoBlue Planet and the collaboration that they have with the University of Ghana to be able to support in providing some information in helping to make the sea a safer place for fishermen to be able to generate early warning systems. The second presentation was from myself, from the University of Ghana, as the implementing institution for the Global Monitoring for Environment and Security and Africa project. And this project is, as part of this project, we're providing fishermen with early warning information so that they will be equipped with such information and for them to make decisions before they go out to sea. And most of the time here in West Africa, the boats they use are very small, and therefore it's any time for the ocean to just topple over with any small wave. So they need that information. And so a lot of stakeholders who attended really liked the idea of channeling or packaging model information into simple messages like calm, rough, and dangerous, just for the fisherman to understand. Yes. And the final presentation came from African Union Commission, represented by Dr. Tidiane Ouattara, who is the coordinator for the GMES and Africa program at the African Union Commission. And he highlighted again on the need for data sharing, the need for us to share data among each other, to share knowledge. Is not only the data, but also knowledge on generating products and forecasts from such data, and also the infrastructure can be shared to be able to generate such early warning information. And he also reiterated the fact that we need to collaborate among each other, institutions, countries. We need to collaborate to be able to share, and all that is needed for making the ocean a safe place for fishermen. Yes.
Thank you, Bennett. Bridging the gap between information and changing behavior can be a tricky pathway. And like Ghana, many regions have fishers using small canoes and vessels who need this information. What is the key for you in encouraging behavior change informed by science?
So for me, the key point is that, so when you come to West Africa, a lot of the fishermen have relied mostly on their traditional knowledge to go to sea and to tell the weather, which usually goes wrong. And so we need to create a lot of awareness for these fishermen to know that there is information that they can access and for them to be able to use to save themselves from all that hassle. And therefore, we need to also share that, create that awareness as much as possible for them to change from using their traditional knowledge. They can still keep their traditional knowledge, but they have to blend it with the information that is provided. And that can also be done by the scientists who are providing the information, trying to incorporate their traditional ideas into the forecast for them to make it more understandable to them. For instance, what we did in the University of Ghana is to help them to use flags also to represent the various ocean states. Like green means calm, you can go to sea, yellow means rough, red means dangerous. So they mount these flags on their beaches. So when anyone sees, even those without mobile phone who cannot access the information, when they see the flag, they can be warned. Yes.
Thank you, Bennett. I think, as you said, information is key, and also the simplicity and the ability to understand that information is important as well. Thank you so much for sharing your satellite activity with us today. And we will soon depart Ghana for Costa Rica.
Thank you. I'll just keep it on.
And we now find ourselves with the National University of Costa Rica with Sylvia Chacon-Brantes, coordinator of National Tsunami Monitoring System, or CINAMOT, and professor.
The boss can't
I'm sorry, Mary. I'm hearing somebody else talking, so I couldn't understand what you said.
Allow me to welcome you properly. Thank you so much for joining us from the National University of Costa Rica. I understand you are coordinator for the National Tsunami Monitoring System, or CINAMOT, as well as a professor at the university. And your satellite activity was around the importance of multi-annual, not just annual, but multi-annual tsunami exercises for a safe ocean. I'm happy to hear headlines from your activity, Sylvia.
Thank you very much. I'm also currently the chair of the Caribbean Tsunami Warning System. And this activity was to present this manual that the Caribbean developed to create a more sustainable way to perform tsunami exercises. In the Caribbean, we have a very strong tradition of tsunami exercises, as we perform Caribe Wave every March since almost 10 years or more than 10 years ago. But one of the things that the organizers of these exercises at the regional level, one of the things they notice is that the countries keep doing more or less the same type of exercise every year. So a group of people led by France came with the idea to develop this guide in order to escalate the exercises and to build a more comprehensive experience. So next slide, please. We started the activity talking about our Caribe Wave exercises, and that we have had 11 exercises with 19 different scenarios. Some years we had one scenario, some years 2 or 3 scenarios. So we have had scenarios located in all the places shown in the screen. Next. And we have had people participating in many ways. We created this year a promotional video that is available in English, Spanish, and French, and can be seen in the Vimeo channel of the IOC-UNESCO. Next, please. And so the guide was developed, as I mentioned before, by France, and then it was written in English, and it was the layout was made by the National University as a collaboration, and you can download it at UNESCO website. So we had the presentation from Marie Noel and from Krista. Guide, next please. And the guide, more or less, I'm just choosing one of the slides, and it says that an exercise program is what you mentioned at the beginning. I think it was Krista who mentioned it, that we are traditionally we made only projects and not programs. So we come with a project that has a limited amount of time, and then it finishes, and is that's it. We don't build up on that. So the guide searches to build on an exercise program that we have it systematically every year and can escalate it up and can improve every year with a program, not isolated exercises every year, but a program that helps over the years. Next, please. And I think that's it from me.
Thanks, Sylvia.
And yes.
Thanks for that. And I heard that, as you mentioned, you have a strong tradition of tsunami exercises. And in regions all over the world, perhaps in the Pacific, just as in the Caribbean, while people may recognize the importance of tsunami exercises, it can be hard to strike the balance between taking them seriously and not panicking. How have you struck the balance with that balance with members of the public?
Well, I particularly, I can talk about both because Costa Rica has coasts in the Pacific and in the Caribbean. In the Pacific, the exercises are held every 2 years, and in the Caribbean, they are every year. So I can tell you, having the exercise march every year in the Caribbean has built up this tradition of the exercise. And the Caribbean communities are searching, and they know that every March we are having the exercise, and it's become a regular thing. When you have it every other year, it's more complicated. It's like, oh, is this year or next year is not, or, you know, it's more complicated to keep it in pace. But in the Caribbean, as the tradition is more sustained, then people are aware that this is an exercise and they don't panic. The experience we have had both in the Caribbean region and in Central America region that I can discuss more properly is that exercises are great for people to remember that there is a threat. And sometimes they said, oh, why are we exercising? Are we expecting a tsunami soon? And then we have to remember a tsunami can come anytime. So we can have a tsunami anytime. And this is why we are practicing. And then that helps people to feel in charge of their own preparedness and their own safety.
So regularity is key, as you mentioned, Sylvia. And just briefly in closing, what would you say are some of the biggest learnings from the tsunami exercises over the years, and how have you adapted to them?
Well, the biggest learning is that practice is definitely needed. Tsunamis are really infrequent threats. So if people don't practice, they forget about it. So practice and exercising help us to be aware that the threat is there and to be prepared and to practice, and this will help us to react better when it happens.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Much appreciated.
Welcome.
And we now depart the National University of Costa Rica for Brazil. Greetings, Simone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce Simone Penafirme, Manager for the Marine Life Center of the Secretariat for Environment of the City Hall of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Simone, your satellite activity was about a smart city for a safe ocean. Tell us more about it.
Hi, Mary. Nice to meet you. And on behalf of the Secretariat for Environment of City Hall of Rio de Janeiro, I would like to thank you very much for having me here tonight. And thank you all the Laboratory Organizing Committee for the support. And we have had very productive discussions promoting the encounter between different sectors, engaging stakeholders in the ocean agenda. And in our satellite activity, we discussed more specifically how to integrate universities, public sectors, and society in the context of smart cities for a safe ocean. And are you hearing me?
Thank you, Simone. We can hear you. Do you have more remarks to share?
No, yes. What we saw in our satellite activity, that we discussed the role of smart city considering climate change, and also we discussed how to include climate justice and communication strategies as well, since the frequency of extreme weather events and urban expansion will affect the most vulnerable people more negatively in the coastal cities. So the value of a smart city in the context of climate emergency is in how that technology is used and communicated to people rather than simply how much technology is available. So we discussed about that mainly also, and to guarantee a safe ocean for all. So to achieve this, we need to support science to better understand the local issues and incorporate this information into the performance of smart cities, together with the public policies and communication strategies at local and regional scales. So we were aware about that, and our point, which we discussed in our satellite activity, and we have been discussing since the first laboratory predicted ocean as well. And so since then, we have been strengthening the dialogue between scientists and government agents, providing trustworthy information about how to achieve a safe ocean in the local context of climate emergency and supporting decision-making. And we have been using the Ocean Decade laboratories as a tool to achieve this. And in this case, in the laboratory A Safe Ocean, we connected scientists who developed programs for monitoring and predicting abrupt changes in the marine environment, more specifically here in Rio de Janeiro, with policymakers and public institutions as responsible for risk analysis, correspondence actions to avoid ocean hazards, as we are studying having this more frequent here in Rio de Janeiro. And how to communicate to the citizens the importance of this knowledge to be aware and prepare. So we were talking about how to integrate society, the scientific knowledge, and how to apply this to the public policies. And yes, we are having a good integration, because nowadays we get started to put all of them together in one of the public programs we have here in Rio, the Operations and Resilience Center, which use artificial intelligence and cutting-edge technologies to improve the society, to have more interactive for the citizens and to integrate with them. So since the beginning, we have been strengthening this dialogue between governments and scientists, and now we just started to incorporate scientific programs, so such as the Brazilian Coastal Monitoring System, into this Operation and Resilience Center of the City Hall of Rio de Janeiro, which is the Center for the Smart City of Rio here. And also we started to incorporate that data from sensors and weather buoys located in the Rio de Janeiro coast. And all of the installation of these intelligent flood sensors. And with this data, we aim to generate local risk analysis, hazard information for probabilistic risk assessments, and so on. So we really aim to create and generate all these protocols together with university, and also to have communication strategies to achieve the citizens. So we can have all these three together and integrated. And in our satellite activities, we showcase how this interaction can benefit the citizens for a safe ocean.
Thank you, Simone. I hope you can hear me clearly. The term smart cities is one that has been around for a few years, and I'd love to hear from you how smart cities can contribute to mitigating the negative effects of climate change for a safe ocean.
Yes, as one of the main objectives of a smart city is to improve citizens' quality of life using smart technologies and data analytics. So using smart technologies as sensors, buoys in the ocean, so we can also use all this data to predict spatial and temporal changes in the coastal marine environment. All of this information provides crucial information for governments, aiding decision-making for adaptation and mitigation actions to protect citizens from ocean hazards. So we believe that if we can use all this information that we can have from smart cities, but also correlated with the communication strategy and including climate justice, we can have better adaptation and mitigation actions more effectively. Yes.
Thanks, Simone. And just before we let you go, you spoke about not just communicating with citizens, but communicating with policy decision makers as well. If you could tell us about some public policies being developed already at the City Hall of Rio de Janeiro to support a safe ocean.
And yes, since the beginning of all this discussion, we have been working together with the decision makers and starting to write some public programs and to incorporate some of the academic programs that we already have here in Rio, such as the Brazilian Coast Monitoring System, which is run by many universities here in Brazil. So it's a national program, and we have one of them here in Rio. So we were starting to integrate these academic programs also to the public policies and create these public programs. So we can integrate the data to the public programs. And in this case, we can have all this data and have all this information to have, for example, historical series and make projections for future scenarios on climate hazards and that will affect now and in the future and the city as sea level rise, storms, waves, floods, and action to prevent and respond to the natural disasters, for example. So we are now doing this and writing this program. So we are very happy that we are putting the ocean in the agenda of the City Hall of Rio de Janeiro and strengthen the binomial of science and public policies. Yes.
Thank you, Simone, for sharing the experiences from the smart city of Rio de Janeiro. And now we go from Brazil to you in the studio, Monica, for our final, our next satellite activity report.
Yeah, we just moved the studio to Honolulu on Hawaii. No, I'm kidding. We're actually in Berlin. But the speaker representing the satellite activity that actually took place or started from Honolulu is here in the studio with me, Bruce Howe. He's a research professor at the Ocean and Resources Engineering Department, School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology. And he's chair of the Joint Task Force for Smart Cables at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and smart subsea cables for a safe ocean. That was also the title of the satellite activity. How did you get to Berlin so quickly?
Well, it's been a while. This is my first travel since COVID, and I've been here 2 months in Europe going around to stakeholders, and I felt this was a fitting conclusion to my trip, and it is.
It's very good to have a real person in the studio as well with me, and obviously, as you're naturally based in Hawaii, bring us up to speed. What was this satellite activity about?
Well, we presented an overview of the project, and I'll say some more on that. But and then several talks on tsunamis in general, and early warning, and Vanuatu specifically, and then Portuguese system being planned. And then we had 3 representatives from industry, because we see that industry is an essential partner for this endeavor.
Well, yeah, I mean, somebody has to fund, as we heard earlier from Krista. You need the money, and somebody also has to execute. But the smart cables, what exactly are we talking about? What makes them smart?
Well, so we, a joint task force of 3 UN agencies, are working to create this global array. You see the map here, for Earth and ocean observing, and to look at climate, ocean, sea level, and earthquakes and tsunamis. And to do this, we are working with the submarine cable industry to integrate environmental sensors into Transocean network. The map shows the 1 million or so kilometers of cable that are operational now, 400 odd systems, which carry 99% of all internet traffic, and enables this, and you know, our past 2 years of having Zoom meetings. So it's essential infrastructure. And the sensors that we're talking about, temperature, pressure, and seismic acceleration, will go in the repeaters you see in the little inset picture there, roughly every 70 kilometers along these cables. The smart CAM system connecting Lisbon, Azores, and Madeira will be the first system to be deployed in 2025. And it's motivated by the disastrous earthquake and tsunami that struck Lisbon and surrounding areas in 1755. And with these systems, we'll be able to have the data to then issue more accurate earthquake and tsunami warnings for a safer ocean.
So if we had those smart subsea cables now already, the Hunga Tonga, Hunga Hapai submarine volcanic explosion that came as a surprise would not have come as a surprise?
If the surrounding cables had smart sensors, that would be a correct statement, yes. That the cable that ended up being destroyed would presumably have given data beforehand right up into the last second and so on. And then if Tonga had a second international cable, which it really needs, that in addition would have provided other independent data.
So you just gave us a number there, 2025 for the stretch Lisbon and the Azores. Where will we be 10 years from now?
Well, in the coming decade, we'd like to, perhaps optimistically, but we would like to see 5 or 10% of the global network have smart capability as cables are replaced and new routes are filled. We would hope to get that coverage, and likely areas of high risk would be covered sooner rather than later, and also, for instance, Vanuatu, New Caledonia is one of the candidate systems.
So what are the required, the necessary next steps in order to achieve that vision, at least, of having 5 to 10% would be obviously better in a decade?
Well, again, in the decade, we really the goal is to have this become a routine activity and a sustained activity. And to get to this point, we first need some initial systems like the Portuguese system and Vanuatu, New Caledonia. And in the meantime, we will continue what we're doing, which is working with all the stakeholders from financing, regulatory agencies, owners and operators and suppliers, and of course the science and early warning system.
Is this also where the blue economy is coming in?
Yeah, so we see this as a perfect example of the blue economy, because we're absolutely 100% dependent on the industry and their goodwill and participation, and we have absolutely positive signs that will develop and continue.
All right, so the ocean is getting smart. We just had an example of smart city, now smart subsea cables. Bruce, thank you so much for stopping here in Berlin to be part of the wrap-up and being in the studio, and enjoy the rest of your trip, and a safe trip home, of course.
Good. A pleasure, thank you.
And we do one more trip from Berlin or Hawaii to Argentina. And this is where we will meet the speaker for the final satellite activity that we want to review in this wrap-up, Emiliano Rodriguez Nush. He's the director at Pacifico Risk Communications Agency and consultant in risk communications and behavioral science in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Emiliano, good to have you with us. And when I was just reading out loud again, consultant in risk communications and behavioral science, this is really very visible in this satellite activity, which also was part in the Ocean Decade booth over the last 2 days, because we're talking about an animated documentary. It's called The Girl and the Tsunami. And before we talk about it, let's just take a glimpse at the trailer.
Ese día había salido. Había estado con mis amigas, con mis amigos, y me fui para la casa, me fui a acostar. Y en eso, cuando me estoy quedando dormida,
well, I get goosebumps just watching at this little snippet there. It's quite amazing how an animated documentary can almost get more underneath your skin than seeing the real images. But Emiliano, tell us, I mean, this is a true story. This is where you got it from. We just saw a trailer, so do tell us a little bit more about it, please.
Yes, thank you for the nice introduction. And it's in fact a 5-minute short animated documentary that tells the story based on real events, which is the big earthquake and tsunami that happened in Chile in 2010. And it's told by the 12-year-old girl 10 years after that. And it's a girl who literally saved her whole community that night. So with that trailer, we wanted to give you a bit of a taste of the story. We also have a few images of other stills, because there's lots of action. This is just the atmosphere and the initial setting. This happens in the island of Juan Fernandez, 1,000 kilometers away from the coast of Chile, in a lovely summer night. Martina, the protagonist, she's 12-year-old. She goes to sleep like everyone else. If we move the slide, pass the slides, there's going to be a picture of her, which was in the news in the next one. When she literally did that, she realized that there was a tsunami coming after a minor earthquake, which wasn't frequent in the island. And this is the island of Juan Fernandez, 1,000 kilometers off the coast of Chile. And I said, a normal night, but then she goes to sleep. We can pass the slide. And she realizes that there's a minor shake. We can move to the next one. I'm going to go real fast, because with her father, they realize that there's something wrong. Something's wrong with the ocean. It seems different, and they receive a call from the continent in which her grandmother tells them there was a big earthquake in the continent. But there were no alerts, no warning in the island, and something that really never happened. So they were realizing something goes wrong. And if we move to the next slide, we see how she reacts, and she wants to start telling everyone that there's going to be a tsunami, that they feel there's going to be a tsunami. But in the next slide, we'll see the waves are already approaching the island. So it's too late. How can she tell everyone to run uphill? There's no time. So then she thinks of the gong. She remembers the gong in the fireman office, that sometime they heard it, they played it or they banged it when there was a fire. And she started to bang the gong so that everyone could wake up in the village and start to run uphill. In the next image, we can see how the whole town was destroyed, like completely destroyed, but the whole family and the community, they meet up uphill. We can see that in the next slide, when they reunite with their father after saving other people that managed to run uphill. It was devastating for them, but thanks to that girl taking the lead and banging the gong, so most of them could literally run uphill and save their lives. So it's a wonderful story, real story, narrated by the protagonist herself, who is a woman now, 11 years after that. She has 2 kids. She lives in another island called Manhattan. It's the first time she's been in the news, like all over the world for many years, but she said that it's the first time that she's been part of a creative process. She's become the real storyteller of the, so there was really communication or citizen participation in the process. And it makes you wonder, why do survivors become such good storytellers? Is it because it's a way of processing trauma for them? Is it because they have to tell it many times, or is it because they have important information that they want to share with the rest of us? There's so much learnings are transmitted and communicated through storytelling, and Martina does it wonderfully in a very short audio. So hopefully we will be able to share it very soon when we launch it as part of the UNDRR global platform in Bali, end of May.
Emilia, it is an absolutely amazing story, and the more you listen and learn about it, the more goosebumps you get. And of course, the execution, how it has been translated into this animated documentary is really gripping. What can we learn from it? I mean, this is also a tool in terms of risk communication. What can we learn from it?
Well, I'm going to quote Silvia Chacon, who spoke a few minutes ago. She said, "We may have a tsunami anytime, and they are infrequent threats." So storytelling and these positive stories, in a way, are an effective vehicle so that draw people's attention, to trigger people's attention, even though there's no tsunami today, and hopefully there will be for some time, but we know they are going to happen, and we want people to learn and connect with it, with this threat, hopefully in a positive way, through building community resilience. And I would say that talking about tsunamis is an opportunity to build a new connection of respect with the ocean, and in an era in which we don't seem to respect the ocean enough. So talking about respect and using storytelling and engaging citizens along the way, I think it's an effective way to keep that conversation ongoing, even though there's going to be some time until the next tsunami.
Hopefully a long time until it happens. Hopefully. But thank you for keeping the awareness and keeping people alert with such a wonderful documentary as this one, which is still in the Ocean Decade booth, as long as the platform is up and running. So if you haven't had a chance yet, you should quickly look it up. Emiliano, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Nice to be here today.
And of course, a big thank you to all the speakers. There is more coming up. And I can tell you coming up next is an artistic session with a Pacific poet. So, Mary, from an animated documentary based on a true story, we now move to an artistic presentation by a Pacific poet. What more do you know about that?
Yes, Monica, I think as Emiliano said, survivors are such good storytellers, and our next speaker is an example of that. Amelia Rigsby is from Fiji. She is a creator, a media personality, and a spoken word artist. And today, Monica, she shares a piece of poetry that she recited at the Vakabwana Safe Pacific Ocean Satellite Activity, talking about a childhood event that shaped her relationship with the ocean. So here is Amelia with her poem titled The Ocean Terrifies Me.
Thank you very much, Mary. Bulvanaka, everyone from Fiji. One of the things that I still carry with me is my terror of the ocean. What I hate more than anything else in this world is deep water. Any water where I can't see the bottom. But unlike most people, I know exactly where this fear started. I was 5 years old and we came down to Fiji for a visit. Before that, we'd been living in Tuscaloosa, Alabama since I was 2 years old. By the time we came down to Fiji, I had no real memories of the ocean or the sea, of salt air or coarse sand. That was all strange to me. I had forgotten what it smelled like when the wind carried the smell of salty tanginess when it blew in off the water. That was before the ocean began to terrify me. I can't remember the memory clearly, but I remember the feeling and what I felt when I went to Kandavu, the place where my mother is originally from. And that feeling was wonder, pure, unabashed wonder that something or someplace could be so beautiful. But even more wonder to know that I belonged to that place. The same way that shoes belonged with socks, that curtains belonged with windows and keys were made for locks, that no matter where I went or what I did, that no one could ever take that away from me. That this place of blue water and white sand was mine. I remember we had gone over to another village that is in Kandavu. Now I'm from Waisomo Ono, which is in Kandavu. So when the sun sets, it sets behind the main island, which means everything. And I mean, everything is always dipped in shadow. It's one of the most beautiful things in the world because it completely changes everything. I remember that as a child, I used to think that it must be time to go to sleep because the world was putting a black blanket over everything to help it fall asleep. Anyway, I don't know why, but my grandmother, my uncle, and I were coming back from Narikoso when it happened. The sun was already setting, and that's when our fiberglass boat capsized. I remember being thrown from the boat and in my 5-year-old mind wondering and thinking to myself, gosh, I wonder if drowning hurts. That was before my grandmother hauled me out of the water, slapped me to stop my screaming, and slung me across her back so that I had my arm anchored about her neck and my legs were floating straight out behind her. She was a superhero and I was like the world's most awkward cape. I remember my uncle and my grandmother and I treading water. I remember my uncle telling my grandmother and I to wait with the boat while he swam toward the lights of our village to get help. I remember watching him swim away, his white t-shirt cutting through the water. And for a while, everything was okay. The sun set behind the mountains of the main island and turned everything that it touched black. The sea became this black, oily surface. It was almost as if we were floating in thick black ink. My grandmother's boininga and the boat were just black blocks because the black blanket was being pulled up to the island's chin. I could hear my grandmother quietly saying her rosary while I clung to her neck and she clung to the hull of the boat. And for a while, everything was fine. That was right before the ocean took my courage. But it was then, right then when everything was quiet and everything was calm, when I felt something brush up against my leg from my thigh right down to my ankle. And it was then that the ocean began to terrify me. We went back to the United States and that was that, but something had changed. I couldn't swim in the deep parts of the ocean anymore. I was terrified of the lake, and even shallow ponds scared me because I couldn't see the bottom. But for all of that, there was still something. Where we lived, there was a field behind our backyard with tall chest-high grass. In the summer, you'd see rabbits darting around, and we'd look for blackberry patches when we were hungry and my father got tired of feeding us. But sometimes, sometimes if the wind blew just right and you looked at the field through slit eyes, the waving grass would almost look like the rolling sea. And in my mind, I would close my eyes and breathe in, and I'd pretend that I was standing on the edge of the beach, breathing in that heady, salty air, even though the ocean terrified me. I'm in my 30s, and I am still terrified of the sea. But just like every other islander, I find any and all excuses to go when I can. Even though, because I can be quite dramatic, I'm always convinced that this time I swim out, it will be the last time. And yet I relish it. I relish the tug of the ocean. So much so that even though I'm terrified, I still walk out until I can't feel the ocean floor beneath my feet. And I swim out as far as I can without breaking down. I force myself to tread water. I force myself to feel the water around me. I force myself to look below me at the floor that I can no longer see. I force myself to not look back at the beach that I just left behind and to just be, because the ocean terrifies me. But despite all that, I still go back. I still answer the call that every small child feels whenever they see water, that unexplainable urge to just jump right in. And I relish it. I relish it because in my mind, when I think back hundreds of years ago to when our ancestors were still other people from Asia, like the scientists say, or other people from Lake Tanganyika, like my grandfather used to say, I imagine that this is probably the same call that they felt. And I wonder, did the ocean terrify them? When they were farming and fishing within their own villages and they looked out to sea, did they too feel that same tug? Did my great-great-great-great-grandfather stand on the beach and look out to sea and wonder what lay on the other side? Did it overcome every sensible thought that he had? So much so that he and others just like him would risk their lives and the lives of their loved ones to hop onto a boat and sail out, not knowing if there was anything to sail out to. Did the ocean terrify them? I'd like to think that it did. I'd like to think that it's the same fear that I feel whenever I'm standing on a beach and urging myself to walk in. I'd like to think that this is the same fear of the ocean that connects me to my people, because it's probably one of the very few feelings that we still have in common. I'd like to think that the ocean is one of the last known links that we have as islanders to our past. So when I stand on that beach with my face towards the sun, my feet in the sand and my heart beating in the past, and I ask myself, Amelia, are you still terrified of the ocean? I embrace my answer with both hands and I. But as the years have passed, I have found that not only am I terrified of the ocean, but more and more I have found myself being terrified for it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amelia Rixby, spoken word artist, for this very gripping poetic narration on The Ocean Terrifies Me. And I think it made our need for a safe ocean even more tangible, listening to this very personal and very gripping account. Very difficult to build a bridge after this to almost the end of this Fifth Ocean Decade Laboratory wrap-up, A Safe Ocean, but we are coming to an end. And I would like to bring Mary in one more time. Mary, obviously my fantastic co-moderator for this wrap-up. Once that what we just heard settles and you can take in the last 90 minutes perhaps, what would you say is your key takeaway?
Monica, I think my key takeaway is really that despite our different contexts, in a way we are all ocean people. and we are affected by the ocean in so many ways, and it's important to respect and live in harmony with our ocean and planet.
And of course, we do have another speaker here who is in your region, but in New Caledonia. And I think you know him better than I do, Mary. So I would give you the honor to introduce him.
Sure, Monica. And before I introduce our next speaker, I will bid you farewell. It was an honor co-moderating with you. Our very best wishes from the Pacific, and we will be watching and participating in future events with oceanic solidarity. So please welcome, delivering closing remarks on behalf of the Pacific from Noumea in New Caledonia, the Deputy Director General of the Pacific Community, SPC, Cameron Diver. Cameron, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mary. Moderators, speakers, and participants, warm Pacific greetings from Noumea in New Caledonia in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. And on behalf of the Pacific region and the Pacific community, my organization, it really is an honor to be able to say a few words in this wrap-up session of the Safe Ocean Online Laboratory. The speakers at this event have rightly shown that ocean safety is a global issue, especially considering the effects of climate change and when climate-related hazards are becoming more frequent and more severe. Now, obviously, this is particularly concerning for people from the Pacific, where coastal communities and ocean users, ocean ecosystems, and blue economies are exposed to episodic, devastating ocean hazards. The Pacific region is 98% ocean. It's an ocean continent. Half of its population resides within 10 kilometers of the coast, and that percentage jumps to 97% of the population when you exclude Papua New Guinea. So building and maintaining effective early warning systems is obviously of crucial importance for Pacific Islanders to save lives and protect livelihoods. Enhancing risk knowledge and implementing efficient warning systems with adequate communications and responses to natural disasters are key to island nations and to coastal populations around the globe. And to do so, scientific information and local and traditional knowledge are absolutely essential to conjugate and to consider together. SPC, my organization, as the leading technical and scientific organization in the Pacific, is providing direct support to Pacific member countries and territories in implementing robust early warning systems and safety at sea initiatives. And alongside other organizations and agencies and our bilateral partners, we're contributing to the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which is a global opportunity to channel more resources and coordinate efforts to know more about our ocean and better protect it, while we also try to adapt to climate change and harness what's an incredibly powerful ocean climate nexus. And as we build towards the Our Ocean Conference in Palau, toward the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, and the many other ocean-focused events over the course of this year and the UN Decade of Ocean Science, I'm really heartened by what I've heard over the course of this event and the wrap-up sessions about the solutions that exist to the multiple challenges that we face, but that in particular are faced by the global ocean. And our ocean community is a really powerful vector for those solutions, as is our ocean identity. And you've heard Amelia's words, you heard Mere's words just prior to this, and that reminds me of what I feel is a wonderful quote by Pacific author and philosopher Epeli Hau'ofa when he was talking about the ocean identity of people from Oceania. And he said, "The sea is our pathway to each other and to everyone else. The sea is our endless saga. The sea is our most powerful metaphor. The ocean is in us." And it doesn't matter whether you're from the Pacific or from elsewhere. If we can collectively and individually harness the ocean in us, just imagine the power, the impact that that message, coupled with the quality of the ocean science we produce, will have on our ocean advocacy, on the decade, on SDG 14, and in particular on the policies and the action we and our planet want and need for a safe and healthy ocean. Vinaka, thank you Tomas, Manuya, merci, and thank you for your attention and all the hard work that you have done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cameron, for this very upbeat and inspiring message from New Caledonia now towards the end of our Ocean Decade Laboratory wrap-up. Let me just give you some logistics before I hand over finally to our two co-chairs. First of all documents, if made available by the speakers, will be available, of course, on the Ocean Decade website shortly. The videos of both the core event and the wrap-up will also be on the Ocean Decade YouTube channel, so you can review it in your own time. I would also like to remind you of the expert roster. That was something definitely that the IOC-UNESCO was calling upon during the core event, because the Ocean Decade and the IOC-UNESCO Secretariat really can do with your help, with your expertise when it comes to strategic, technical and review processes. So if you're interested in that, look it up and join the expert roster. Yeah, and that basically leaves me to say thank you very much for having me again, because now it's time to hand over one more time to our co-chairs, Christoph von Hillebrand Andrade and Burkhard Baschek. Over to you.
Many thanks, Monica. Yeah, thank you, Monica. So it has been a series of events, from the opening event, the satellite activities, now the wrap-up. They've been touching, they've been inspiring, and they've been educational. And they have been shared all around the globe, 116 countries during the opening event. Also now there are people watching from all around the world. And usually would say we're oceans apart, but that's not true. We're connected by the oceans. We have one purpose that we all share, and that is in particular to help develop a safe ocean. And I think these events do make hope that we will make some progress in the coming years, in this remainder of the decade. And that's really wonderful to see. I'm certainly proud to be part of that ocean community, and I do know that we will continue to connect and work towards our common goal. Now, at the end of that series of events, actually many months and actually years of preparations behind it, it's also like, I think, a time to say thank you to a lot of people. First of all, to you, Monica, for leading us through wonderful events here. You did a wonderful and great job about that. And then also in particular, the supporting roles all along from the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, the German Federal Ministry of Research that have helped us, and also in the background. Nobody knew about it. Familie Redlich, who has organized the events in the background, did a terrific job. But most of all, of course, like to all the contributors, a big thank you. I really felt honored that we're able to be guests in the different regions, be part of that in the Caribbean, at the west coast of North America, and now the Pacific Island regions. Has been tremendously inspiring to me. Thank you also to our expert group who's worked on this for quite some time. And I think we can be quite glad that we had some step here that started to connect the people. So with that, I would also like to say goodbye. We will see each other in one or the other way. And I would like to hand over to Christoph von Hillebrand Andrade.
Yeah, thank you very much, Burkhard. I think you summed it up really well, that deep appreciation that we have for all that have participated, right, and have made possible the engagement of hundreds of people across the world in the Safe Ocean Laboratory. For me, being from the Caribbean and an islander, it's been really, really special to share this activity with our Southwestern Islanders. I think we have a very big connection. I think sometimes we think we're a world or oceans apart, and we're really very close. So I think that was, for me, I'll treasure that. And, we just have to keep our eyes on the ocean, right? No, never put our back, keep our eyes on the ocean. And while this Safe Ocean Lab does come to an end, the journey needs to continue. And we can't do this alone. Of course, we need to reach across the silos, including the decade outcomes. And so you'll recall that, in fact, one of the main takeaways from our discussion over the past 48 hours was that the multi-hazard early warning systems and services require governance and sustainability. And so we're super happy and delighted to know that this will be one of the topics of the next Ocean Lab, an accessible ocean, which will take place on May 10th to 12th. So now we're going to have the opportunity to watch the video and meet the co-chairs and find out the exciting activities that they have planned. And so time to say goodbye, but always, always try to stay safe. And until our paths meet, whether in person or across these virtual means and the smart cables that Bruce spoke about. So hasta luego, muchas gracias, y I guess now take it off. Accessible Ocean video, and what do you have on store for us May 10th through 12th? See you there.
Together with Sebastian Unger from the Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, I am excited to invite you to the Ocean Decade Laboratory, an accessible ocean. What makes it accessible, this ocean? Well, information and data, knowledge about the ocean enables us to govern it. And that's exactly where we will put the emphasis on. Governing this ocean through knowing it. What data, what kind of information do we already have with regard to the world ocean, the global water body that covers our planet? And which kind of data do we need in order to feed it into policy-making processes, in order to contribute to the governing of this ocean in a sustainable manner?
Over the course of 3 days, we will have 3 sessions. On day 1, we will look into what knowledge is needed for the ocean we want. We will talk to policymakers, to key actors in governance to find out what knowledge is needed to guide these governance processes. For example, with regard to halting loss of biodiversity, combating marine litter, or developing new ocean-based solutions to tackle climate change. We have a second session that will look into promising science initiatives, into innovative approaches for data gathering, assessment, and information sharing. And we will talk to key scientists and key science initiatives. On day 2, we will have a broad range of exciting satellite initiatives of different science initiatives. And wrapping up on day 3, we will have a third panel looking into what kind of science policy interfaces do we need to move from knowledge to action. The next 10 years will be crucial for the future of the ocean, and we want to explore what type of outcomes the Ocean Decade could produce to foster different applications of best available knowledge in decision making.
So please join us. We are looking forward to meeting you there.